Today we have a great malicious compliance story where a request to return some equipment ends up in total chaos. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, pay or take the tent down. This was probably 20 to 25 years ago. My parents would go camping at a campground a couple of times throughout the summer. Around this time, I was around 16 years old. The old campground couple who have been there for at least a decade managing it, parents and family knew them well, had retired. Up till this point, no one had a problem with having a tent set up on the lot with a pop-up. The new managers, going by the rules in the book, were not having it. They said it's in the book, if an extra tent or pop-up is on the lot, it's $5 a day. They said it's $10 or remove the tent, or we can leave with no refund. Parents paid for 2 days. A couple of my close friends went with us and very well couldn't fit in the camper. From that point, we started to gather change and gathered the $10 in all pennies. We even left to go get change for a $5 bill in pennies, came back and counted all of them, hopped in the friend's car. The other friend had all the pennies in the belly of his shirt, drove up to the gate. The new managers were at their table. The guy with the change gets out and gets up to the table and dumps the $10 in pennies on the table. They look up and ask what it's for, but he goes, the $10 for the tent. They ask why it's in pennies. Dude goes, because I'm freaking poor. Turn around and is trying not to laugh. We get back to the lot and we are dying. They never said another word to us the whole weekend, and I don't think they were the managers after that. Uncle said that he talked to the old managers and apparently kept bothering people with the stuff they did for years. Cool memories. All I know is if those people were truly in charge of that place, I'm sure they would institute some kind of new rule where you can only pay fees up to X amount of dollars in change or some nonsense like that. I mean, could you imagine having 1,000 pennies splayed all over your table and trying to figure out how the heck you're going to deal with these? I mean, it's not like you even want to take it to a coin machine because the fees on those things are insane. Social Butterfinger commented, I tell my kids it's not unfair when a teacher makes you follow the rules. It's unfair in your favor when they don't. See the times when you're allowed to talk or eat in class as a bonus and not as your due, and you'll be much happier. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of malicious compliance, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? Our next story is my ex-coworker as a youth. Before I begin, it's lengthy, but it's a funny story. Since it's secondhand, take it as you will. So as my title states, this is an ex-coworker from a job many years ago when he was in his teens. So late 50s to early 1960s, he shall be known as M. M grew up in a small town. When I say small, I mean one traffic light, gas station, diner, post office, and a couple other things. And a library, this factors in later. M and his buddies were bored. They didn't have much to do in town, and the next bigger town was an hour drive one way. Knowing his age, it was uphill both ways. So they were, as teens with cars, bored. They decide to go to the library. They find a book, and in this tome, they find the perfect nighttime activity. Giddy with excitement, I'm embellishing since I don't know for sure. They get their supplies. Cue nighttime. Em and his friends get into their cars and start driving down the roads and crisscross through the small town, making lots of racket. Nothing dangerous, and they're driving below the speed limit. About an hour later, the one sheriff for the town pulls the guys over and gives them tickets for disturbing the peace and a summons to appear in court. They stand before the judge, known now as Jay. Jay reads the case details and asks how they plead. M has been nominated as the speaker for the group and informs Jay as such, with his friends agreeing. Your Honor, my friends have elected me to speak on their behalf. And before we go further, can I ask a question? Jay said, proceed. M asks, when we enter our plea, may I explain why we did it? The judge replies, absolutely. M says, well then, Your Honor, for the charge of disturbing the peace, we plead guilty since we in fact were. But, Your Honor, we had good cause. The judge is equal parts irritated and intrigued and said, okay, I need to hear this. Proceed. M said, thank you, Your Honor. Essentially, we are both guilty and innocent. Guilty because we did do what it claims on the ticket. We are innocent because of what we did is actually a law. The judge replied, come again? M said, well, we were in the library and found a copy of the laws for the town, and inside of it, we found this law. All horseless carriages must drag 8 feet of logging chain with links of 3/4 an inch behind itself at night. The judge says, "Clerk, go to the library and bring this book." A few minutes later, the clerk brings it before the judge. The judge said, "Show me." M replied, "Give me a moment, sir," and paused through until finding the page and says, "Here, Your Honor." The judge looks at it, and sure enough, there is in fact a law describing what M claimed. The judge said, "Their charges are dismissed, but don't do it again because it will not be in this book." Sorry for the lengthy post, but I'm riding the train into work and had time to type it out. On my cell, by the way. But I did warn you. Does anybody else know about some crazy laws that are out there? Isn't there something ridiculous about you can't have a horse on the beach or some nonsense in some state? You can't sing in public on Wednesdays in some place or something stupid? Bouch Adi Shaila commented, "I believe it's in California that it's illegal to carry an ice cream cone in your pocket. It makes me wonder how much trouble ice cream cone slinging outlaws caused in California." Squirreltail replied, "Kentucky, not California. The secret on that one is horses. Thieves would use a frozen treat in the back pocket as a method for enticing a horse away from its pen or hitching post." "No, Your Honor, I didn't steal the horse. It just followed me of its own accord." Our next story is no hair that touches the shirt collar? Okay, we'll wear wigs. This is setting the Wayback Machine to the early 90s, back when the membership warehouse I worked for allowed smoking in the break room. One day, seemingly out of nowhere, our warehouse manager decided to enforce the dress code that men's hair could not be long enough to touch the collar of our shirt. This was a problem for a few of my coworkers who had very long hair. One guy had been growing his out since high school, and it was down to his butt. Well, none of them wanted to cut their hair, but were being given no wiggle room. Well, one day, the guy referenced above came to work with short hair. It looked like he actually cut it, but after a few days he told us, no management, that he had a wig made that looked like his real hair. This led to all the other guys with questionable locks getting wigs. Now where the malicious compliance comes in is that the wigs became to get more and more ridiculous. A ginger got one that was jet black. An African American guy had a wig with red hair. It got to the point the shoppers were making comments, and these guys weren't shy about telling them that management said they weren't allowed to have long hair. The whole fiasco lasted less than 4 months before we were told that as long as the natural hair was clean, presentable, and didn't interfere with working duties, length would no longer be an issue. I mean, I know it was the early 90s, so things were just straight up different then, but I've never really understood the crusade on hair or hair color. And even in schools, I've never understood why you can't have crazy hair colors. At least my school had an actual rule where you just couldn't dye your hair green or blue or any unnatural color. I remember growing up at high school, one day this one kid came with a really awesome spiked mohawk. And he hadn't taken but 2 or 3 steps off the bus, and faculty immediately swooped him up, took him to the office, and forced him to douse his hair with water so it wasn't standing up all spiked. It was almost as dumb as the fact that you can't show shoulders or else apparently people will be too distracted to be able to learn. Bobarg commented, "Back in the 1970s, Singapore was rather restrictive on the length of hair on males coming into the country. I remember there were posters at the airport indicating acceptable hair lengths. We tried to get one of those posters for my brother because the image of a guy with the maximum acceptable hair length looked exactly like my brother's hair. Anyway, we moved from there to Indonesia, and a year or two later, we had an American friend visit us from Hong Kong. This man was completely bald but had gotten a very stylish toupee. He was probably mid-40s at the time and was a missionary, so his hair was typical of an adult male's hair at the time. That is, he wasn't a long-haired, freaky person. He came through Singapore and was going to stay for a day or two. When he went through Singapore customs, he was pulled aside and they told him his hair was too long. He took his toupee off and laughed, but the Singapore customs officials did not see the humor. He seriously thought they were going to confiscate his wig. I don't remember if there was any fallout, well, besides his natural hair, that is, and I don't know if he had to keep the toupee in his luggage while he was in Singapore. Our next story is, manager told us we had to do the dress code to the letter, so I did, to the letter. I used to work at a company that had a business casual dress code. It was always sort of ambiguous. People wore polo shirts, button-down shirts, blouses, slacks, whatever. No one cared as long as you looked tidy. Then we got a new manager. In his first week, he sends out an all-staff email. From now on, the dress code is to be followed verbatim as written in the handbook. no exceptions. Alright, I dug out the dusty employee handbook and really read the dress code. It hadn't been updated since the late 90s. It was very specific. Men, dress shirt, tie, slacks, and jacket. Women, knee-length skirt, nylons, blouse, and closed-toe shoes. No polos, no cardigans, no khakis. The next Monday, I showed up in a suit and tie. I hardly ever wear jackets to work, so everyone right away noticed. And then other individuals started reading the handbook too, because, after all, the boss read it precisely as written. The office was a time capsule by Wednesday. A coworker was wearing shoulder pads and nylons in the August heat. Another guy pulled out his wedding gear. Some even showed up at work with suspenders because the handbook allows it. Half of the staff sweated buckets because we weren't allowed to take our jackets off our bodies when sitting at our desks. HR was not happy, so they got a few complaints of hostile working conditions due to the imposed dress code. 1 week later, we got a new message. Use common sense in following the dress code. Business casual, as done before, is fine. Polos and khakis were once again in style, and our manager never brought up the handbook again. New manager comes in and goes, look, we've got to clean things up in here. You all running around here wearing your Ralph Laurens thinking your business acceptable. Back in my day, everybody wore a fedora and a suit. Going down to the corner store was at least a three-piece affair. North Artichoke 6721 commented, I had a friend at a previous job who wore his necktie around his head. When asked to remove it, he said he was following the dress code. Men must wear a button-down shirt with a tie. Nowhere did it specify where the tie was to be placed. It was a call center. We never saw our clients in person. Cheers, Brandon, you absolute legend. Our next story is, do not speak to the regional manager. Many moons ago, I was the lowest guy at a rent-a-center. The regional manager, Greg, was visiting, and my manager, wanting all the attention, told me not to speak to Greg for any reason. When Greg arrived, he introduced himself and shook my hand, but I stayed silent. My manager gave a nervous smile and told him my name. Later, the phone rang for Greg. I yelled for my manager across the store that the phone was for Greg, even though Greg was standing right next to me. Greg asked why I didn't just tell him directly. I silently looked at my manager, who awkwardly admitted he'd told me not to talk to him. Greg found it ridiculous, and my manager looked like a fool. Could you imagine the manager after the fact? Come on, man, you were supposed to use your discretion. I didn't mean it literally that you weren't supposed to talk to the guy at all. You made me look like an idiot. Well, boss, that was kind of the point. Magali with an eye commented, had that happen as an intern when a fund manager came to make a presentation. Super interesting talk. My boss had allowed me to listen, but I was not allowed to say a word. When the guy at the end asked if we had found that interesting looking at me, since I was the only one not having said a single word, she even cut a, yes, it was, while I remained silent. I thought they didn't want me to say anything incorrect or make a fool of myself. It was years before I realized that probably had to do with the fact that her English was medium, while mine was fluent. Our next story is, no problem, sign this. It seems that you people love my malicious compliance truck stories, all of which are true, and this one will be no different. In this episode, I'm driving the twin-stick R-model Mack boom truck, the largest in our fleet. This truck was big, heavy, and it had an unusually wide turning radius. At that time, I delivered construction materials. While we had residential and commercial materials, I often focused on new construction and commercial sites due to the truck being so large. Every once in a while, I would get a residential delivery. Mostly these deliveries I could make from the street without having to pull on the property. This is not one of those stories. So this one day, I'm told I'm doing a residential roofing delivery to the roof of the house. My radar is on now because I'm familiar with the roads in that area and they are narrow. Delivery to the roof means I have to enter the property and get right up to the house. I get loaded and get to the job. As I approach the job site, the road is narrow, barely 20 feet wide. The house is on my left, and facing the property, the driveway is on the left. Important in a second. I stop and go find the person in charge. He says, "You're right on time. I need you in the driveway and boom across the roof." I say, "That's great, but there are several issues." 1. All vehicles parked in the street need to be moved down past the neighbor's house for me to fit down this road. 2. I cannot make the turn from the street onto the driveway without driving across the lawn, backing up 2 or 3 times. 3. I cannot guarantee that driveway can support the weight. He shouts, "I'll move the trucks and you just get your truck in here," in a very demeaning tone. I say, okay, I will. As I back down the street to the intersection, turn around and back up the road, he gets all the trucks moved. I get into position to pull on the property and stop. I grab my clipboard and jump out. I walk up to him and say, "I need you to sign this. We carry legal forms in the trucks that when signed makes the signee or their company responsible for any damage to the property, truck, load, or towing fees to get the truck off site." He signs and all, but throws the clipboard at me. Well, okay then, game on. I turn into the yard and pull across the driveway and back up 4 times to get the truck completely on asphalt. Once in the best position I could get, I got out and looked at my handiwork. 8-inch ruts all across the front 29 feet of yard from the street. Each edge where my tires went from grass to asphalt or asphalt to grass, the driveway collapsed and broke away. The rest of the driveway had several 6-inch ruts that were at least a foot wide on most of the driveway. But I'm not done yet. I have to put down my outriggers to stabilize my boom. Because the driveway was as wide as the truck, it meant that when I put them down, they would be in the lawn. I carried large blocks to enlarge the footprint of the outriggers to get stability on soft ground. This left 2 more 10-inch holes in the yard, about 3 foot by 4 foot square. I delivered the entire load with no issue. Then the homeowner came home as I was climbing off the boom and started screaming at me for the state of his driveway and yard. I calmly turned and pointed to the job foreman and said, "You need to talk to him," then turned back around and finished wrapping up the truck. I could hear them as they were screaming at each other, but couldn't understand what they were saying. The final insult, I had to ask both of them to move their vehicles so I could back out. And yes, more ruts were made leaving. I paused on the street for a minute to check out my handiwork. It was bad. I got back to the warehouse and the bosses cornered me before I could get into the office. The contractor's boss had blown up my boss's phone with threats and complaints. I quickly explained and pulled out the signed affidavit. Boss said, "Well, okay then, we're covered," and I heard nothing more about it. That affidavit has saved my butt a lot over the years and has afforded me some great and funny malicious compliance over the years. I don't really know what this guy was in such a rush over. I guess they wanted to get the job done. I don't know, maybe they aren't paid by the hour to do whatever work they were doing. Maybe they were dumb and estimated that this job could be done in X amount of time and booked up multiple jobs. Whatever it was calamitous, and it absolutely is on that job foreman for being so dumb and dismissive. OP essentially told them to their face, "Hey buddy, I'm gonna have to basically destroy the entire front yard to make this happen, but I guess I can. Can you put your name right here that says you approved all that?" Me Folly commented, "I do not understand people who look straight at an experienced service provider and dismiss every warning given. I just told you 3 times that if I do what you're asking, there will be consequences. Bad ones, guaranteed." And those people say, "Nah, I wanna. Here, sign my waiver." Our next story is, it'll be faster if you don't use a search engine. Like so many others, my company bought heavily into the whole AI first thing. We're so committed to it that we're underbidding projects with the hope that AI will save so much on labor that we'll still turn a profit. Needless to say, this means pushing everyone into using AI as heavily as possible, even to the point where we're supposed to use AI instead of web searches. And as a programmer, I do a lot of web searching. You would be forgiven if you thought I regularly do the same kinds of things day in and day out, but if I have to do something more than once, I stick it in a code library and just reuse that. So most of the real work involves a lot of research. It's a rare day that I spend more time typing than reading. For programmers, AI is built into our tools. The idea is that you want the AI to have as much context as possible, and by including it in the tools, it will automatically upload all of my open tabs into the AI engine along with my question. But here's the thing I didn't realize at first. One of those tabs is an 82 megabyte code file containing all of the instructions to build a database from scratch. So with each question, it's uploading that whole file to Microsoft's AI servers, and those servers have to crunch through the file before even starting on my question, which explains why I have to wait 6 minutes before the AI gives me the wrong answer instead of 1 second for Google to give me a different wrong answer. I'd love to tell you about the fallout, about how the company freaked out when they learned how many AI tokens I was burning through, but this is just increasing my engagement, so the only immediate effect is that I stop getting "you aren't using AI enough" emails. Oh, and don't worry about my project being late because of this. The bottleneck is, as always, waiting on the customer to decide what they want. So I'm still spending most of my day reading books and wasting time on Reddit. You know, I'll be honest, sometimes I catch myself asking ridiculous questions to ChatGPT. One of the best ways I know how unreliable it is I'll ask it about like some nonsense thing about a TV show that I know so well. And just because it doesn't have the capability to fully understand like the synopsis of an episode, it'll make like some completely random event up. And it'll be presented as if it was exactly the truth and exactly what happened. So I fear for anybody that's going to these things and like trying to figure out like health symptoms or even anything when they're seeking actual truthful information. It's just designed to try to like confirm whatever it is that you told it, even if it has to like make some nonsense up and try to keep you engaged with it. Dr. Honey commented, "Every time I ask AI a question, it uploads another copy of our entire proprietary repo. If we keep this up, we can train it to offer our code verbatim to every competitor that asks a question." Our next story is, need all the equipment back? Fine. This project is all yours too. Inspired by another post of removed admin privileges, here's one of my tales of internal concepts not meeting external realities. I was working remotely for a European-based manufacturer of, at least my division, high-end broadcast processing equipment. They also made other pro equipment, but this area was the highest end and by far the most technically demanding. Very niche-y, very configuration dependent, etc. Great technical staff and developers in Europe. We had great relationships being a bunch of tech nerds who could talk about IP ranges and capacitor values for hours. The US office just took orders from HQ over there. Had some good basic techs, but not set up to do any high-end troubleshooting, which is exactly why I existed. There was an acquisition coming up, and auditors started to be involved. We had to send in inventory of all of our computers and test gear, etc. Fine, whatever. Well, remember that setup dependent part? I was right in the middle of a huge project with one of the largest US broadcasters, which had already resulted in one of the largest upgrade sales this division had ever made and was testing some fresh from the sandbox SNMP features. This is pretty old tech that's still being used, so I enlisted an older Supermicro server I had been barely using for remotely accessing some kit in my workshop to do some basic SNMP functions to make sure these new features didn't bung anything up before I literally put them in air on 50 plus stations. Things were working fine with tests. I would get a new revision first thing in the morning, bang on it a bit, send it off to my tech contact by my EOD at the network, which was his morning. Not terribly difficult, but pretty niche-y, and also one reason I worked for this company. No one knew at all what any of this was in North America. So, auditors are involved, and the North American office that just takes orders sees this Supermicro server on the inventory list, and it's just the end of the world. Why is there a server out in the field? Why do you need so much test equipment? Who approved this? Etc. My first couple of replies were just disregarded because no one knew what I was talking about. A decision was made that this server had to go back. A third insistence from me that this was actively used and who else would take this over fell on deaf ears. It was the most important thing in the entire world that they get this server back. It's a junky old Supermicro 1RU utility beast that cost maybe $1,000 at most. For whatever reason, I was feeling extra snarky the day I should have boxed the server up, so I wrote an extra friendly note to all the techs, the decision makers at the US office, and to my tech contact and his boss at the network, introducing everyone, thanking them for taking over this critical project, and thanking HQ for helping take on this time-sensitive test phase that would really help me get to other critical projects. About 25 minutes later, I sent tracking information for all the kit, Still didn't box up the server I was supposed to send back. About an hour later, I get a really odd email from one of the decision makers in the US office. He doesn't want to admit that no one at HQ doesn't know what the heck I was talking about technically, and simultaneously realized that this is a huge account that would totally affect their bonuses if another nice sale came through. They were trying to save face and cover for their techs by suggesting maybe I get them up to speed on the project before we do anything drastic. I just replied to his email with the tracking information again and mentioned I had suggested this 3 times now. 25 minutes later, I get a freaked out phone call from the head tech at the US HQ. Him and his superior, the decision maker, have just gotten a very nice call from my contact's boss at the network. They were so happy with the service so far. I had a great relationship at this point, and excited that having someone else checking these updates would allow me to be on site more, big future plans, etc. He's wondering who's going to do this work now. Now this comes up? I just repeated that 3 times this was brought up now, so clearly this decision was educated. They know best. So now there's full-blown panic at US HQ. Knowing this, I send a note to the developers in Europe to make sure the new updated code goes to the catch-all address for the US HQ tech team, and not me, because they will be doing the testing going forward. This has the desired effect because now the head of development in Europe is on the horn with the decision maker in the US, wondering about who they recently hired without approval to be able to have these in-house resources now. By the time that UPS pickup was supposed to have happened, somehow having this old server back was no longer the highest priority. In fact, I never heard about the server again. You know, I love that OP just kept on pushing this thing through, was like, listen, I warned you 3 whole times, man. Take the dang server back. I'm done with this. You guys wanted it oh so bad. Our next story is, don't want to play? No problem. I've worked in computer security for a very long time. A security policy that I'm sure most of the audience here is familiar with is that you always lock your computer when you walk away. Even if you're an accountant or a receptionist, you just can't leave your machine unlocked ever. About 10 years ago, my team would have fun with this. If you ran to the bathroom or even had a conversation with your back turned, someone would sneak up to your computer and jump on the chat client or even email and say something silly or stupid like, "Does anyone know the meaning of life?" or some other random thing. A lot of the teams would do this, and it was mostly harmless, but was also supposed to shame you into remembering to lock your computer before you walk away, without reporting you to security for your formal reprimand, retraining, write-ups, disciplinary action, job hunt. Everyone knew it was good-natured, and when the messages went out, everyone had a good laugh. One day, a new guy shows up and he leaves his computer unattended. I introduce myself, shake his hand, chat him up a bit, and finally tell him he needs to lock his computer when he walks away. It's company policy. He probably ignored that in training, but it's a big deal. Sent him the documentation because he thinks it's stupid. Again, we're in the security umbrella. He says, whatever. I shrug, walk away, and he walks away making a show of not locking his computer. He got multiple warnings over his first few weeks from his team and others, but was a complete butt about it. After a while, the team decides he's had enough warnings and started being granted access to sensitive stuff, and so he was fair game. Not long after, I walked by him on his way to the elevator atrium, so I know he's going to be gone for a while. I sit down, find his email client, and type out a silly message to his team's DL and hit send. As I'm standing up, he's walking back. He finds me and demands to know what I was doing. I shrug, say, whatever, and walk away. Later that day, his manager walks up and tells me that he explained the situation to his new employee and that the new guy didn't want to play that game and was considering reporting me to security for impersonating him. Really? Okay, no problem, Mr. Manager. We were on very good terms. We will not play the game with your newbie. I will follow standard procedures. I got my team and a few others on chat to tell them that under no circumstances should anybody fire a message from him when they saw his computer unlocked. No shame reminders for newbie, just follow the standard procedure. Almost 50 security violation tickets were logged in the next 2 days. His desk happened to be closer to the elevator atrium, break room, and bathrooms, so a lot of normal traffic. He was in security retraining the following Monday. We were in an open floor plan, and I could see how mad he was talking to his manager and gesturing in my direction quite a bit. Not my fault. I'd only opened 2 tickets. His manager asked me to let up. Sorry, just following standard procedure. If I don't report these violations, I'm liable. Dude's computer was locked for the rest of that Monday only. The following day, as I walked by, there was his email for all eyes to see and newbie nowhere to be found. He happened to be getting coffee, which was my destination as well, and I told him I noticed he forgot to lock his computer. He cussed me out and speed walked back. The damage was done. He'd already had a dozen tickets opened by others, and the security policy had changed at some point. Now it was a quick retraining and then straight to disciplinary action. No write-up. He had to attend a meeting with his boss, director, and some security folks. I would find out much later that he got put on a security-related PIP. He was gone in a week. No one was out to ruin anyone's career here, but if you want to work in security and flagrantly violate policy because, I don't know why, well, you don't belong there. So I'm assuming it ran on Windows, maybe a Mac, depending on whatever, but I'm assuming Windows. If anybody is on a PC, here's what you gotta do to lock your computer. You press the Windows key and the letter L. That's it. That guy could not be bothered to press 2 buttons before they just got up and walked away. Like, even ignoring the fact that this is a security violation, it's such a simple step that if it was a policy not even for security reasons, he deserves to get fired because it was that simple. Coder Joe 1 commented, "Yup, after getting shamed and a warning, I set up my lock screen to look like an open email client. Had plenty of fun with that one until the admin undid my changes." But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy malicious compliance story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That's it, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.